Welcome back, everybody. For almost 40 years, it helped guide shipping boats through some of the most treacherous shipping lanes in the world. And now, the Lightship Nantucket serves as a museum ship in Boston. That's after hosting thousands of visitors as a museum ship here in Portland under the stewardship and protection of the U.S. Coast Guard Sector Northern New England.
To pay tribute to its crew's efforts, the Coast Guard is set to receive a historic gift later this morning. Here to tell us more is Master Mariner Captain Jeff Monroe from the nonprofit International Association of Maritime and Port Executives. Thank you so much for being here with us this morning.
Glad to be here.
I mean, you got a long title.
I know.
You know, we just call it Impy.
There you go. Well, first of all, this is a vessel with plenty of history. Can you kind of share more on that with us?
Well, the interesting connection to Portland is that during the Second World War, it served as the examination vessel up here, so that all of the vessels coming in and out of the port, you know, had to clear through, and the Coast Guard maintained the ship during that period. But she was normally on the shipping route from England and Europe and into the United States, into New York, at the head of the shipping lanes. And what wound up happening in 1975, she was retired from the Coast Guard. And then she went to Nantucket as a static museum, and then she was picked up by the Mellon Foundation, who restored it, fully operational. And we brought it here to Maine, and she was here in Maine for about 5 years and so. And then she went to the Intrepid Museum down in New York, and then got transferred to another group, then eventually wound up in Oyster Bay, Long Island. And what wound up happening was she was deteriorating, and a group in Boston called the National Lightship Museum and Foundation got a hold of her, brought her up to Boston, spent millions of dollars, restored her again, and so now she's in East Boston, and she serves as a museum ship and as an educational platform for school children.
Yeah, something this big really needs a team effort. Talk about how the Coast Guard played a part.
Well, the Coast Guard, we had a lot of tight connections with the Coast Guard in northern New England here. This was before it all became a sector. But we had Coast Guard personnel who helped out, who volunteered on the ship, who operated with us on the vessel, and also, you know, we had to be Coast Guard inspected by them, and so they would always work with us to make sure that we got through the inspections. The biggest thrill we got, though, was all of the people who would re-up, you know, and do their re-enlistments and everything, would always do it and come aboard the ship and do it there, you know, because it had such a historic nature. But it was wonderful, and we've always been very supportive of them. And the IMPE has trained about 130 and certified Coast Guard personnel, and so we thought it would be kind of appropriate to remember her time here in Portland, right, but also to honor the Coast Guard for their contribution to the ship.
And you were one of the captains while she was in Portland. Can you tell us more about that experience, its time here as a museum ship, and how it served the community?
Well, we used to keep her right down on Commercial Street, and rented one of the berths down there, the commercial berths, and take her up and down the coast. And we would take her to various institutions and various ports and stuff like that, and people could come and visit and stuff like that. And the head of the Lighthouse Museum up in Rockland was one of the captains, as was Captain Earl Walker, who was a pilot here, and Finney Sprague and Joe Benzing from Mobil Oil. So we shared that experience and everything. But we had people who volunteered, and they would take the ship around, and they would, you know, look after the programs and make sure that, you know, all the little children that came aboard and everything, that they gave them the whole history of the ship and everything. So it was really a lot. And of course, they swung hammers and maintained the vessel, and paintbrushes, you know, kept her going.
Yeah, it's a floating classroom, kind of like Maine Maritime Academy. You brought in a picture of the vessel that we're going to show you right now. Can you tell us more about this gift, its meaning, and why your organization wants to pay tribute to the Coast Guard?
Well, we located this in Baltimore, Maryland, at an antique shop, and it was actually transported up to Portsmouth by a ship. And then we picked it up.
Who found that?
Huh?
At an antique shop?
At an antique shop. It was one of our members who happened to be going through, and he saw this picture there, and he says, yeah. So what we wanted to do was find an appropriate place for it, and so that's why we thought that the Coast Guard base here. So we're going to be presenting it to the new commanding officer over there of the Coast Guard. But it's a historic picture, and what it delineates is the initial crew that had done the restoration of her to put her back into operation. Right, and then we're going to put a plaque with it and everything that is a tribute to the Portland folks there as well.
Wow, incredible. And again, just tell us about the vessel now and its role in Boston.
Well, she's been restored, as I say, and she's maintained in East Boston. She's had a berth down there, and very, very active program. The National Lightship Museum has done a great job getting the vessel restored and raising money to try to keep it running and everything. And of course, it's a big, strong metropolitan area, Boston, and it has a connection to Boston because it was in the 1st Coast Guard District. So as a result of that, we get a lot of school children who come to visit the vessel and everything. So I think that's been wonderful. And they have trained, docents who help them understand not only the value of the Coast Guard, but also the value of navigation and maritime heritage and all the rest of it. Of course, there's a lot of vessels down there that are focused on that.
Yeah, you've been involved in the shipping industry for years, of course, being a captain. Tell me how important it is, the mariner history and everything, and not just the history, but what's going on currently and the future, especially the coast of Maine.
Well, the interesting thing is that now in the industry, and we track the industry on a daily basis at the IAMPE, what we find is that there are so many changes going on. So, for example, the only time anybody notices what goes on in the shipping industry is when there's a logistics interruption like there was during COVID and everything. So we're all trying to get things back together. We had low water in the Panama Canal, which interrupted movement, and of course what was going on in the Red Sea, which interrupted movement. So we're watching cargo shift, we're watching the cost of cargo go up, and transporting it and everything. So one of the things we try to do is we try to look at what the industry is doing, and when we train our port professionals, we help them to understand what it is that they need to be focused on, not only to keep their ports vital, but also to deal with those issues that might potentially come up, in disruptions, like they had in LA Long Beach, for example, and all the cargo shifted to the East Coast. And here in Maine, I think what's nice about it is the fact that, we have the vital ports, certainly Searsport and Portland, and Eastport now, which is moving cargo out on a monthly basis. So it's important to us because you buy commodities off the shelf, and if that commodity has to come up from New York or come through Montreal, you're going to pay more money for that, right? So having this valuable service of IMSCIP, for example, which connects all over the world through CGM, that keeps the prices in reason for us here in Maine.
Well, thank you so much for joining us here on ARC Maine and sharing more about this amazing ship.
Happy to be here.
Yeah,
Still
appreciate
can't believe
it.
they found that at an antique store.
You never know what you're going to find, right?